Hey guys! Alright, today's question comes from the user quiteafewfireflies on Reddit, who's one of my favorite Redditors. They say, 3 questions, they're all kind of interrelated. What role does selfishness and self-centeredness play in mental health and personal fulfillment? How do you find the line between doing what's best for yourself and serving others? And what can FE types learn from FI types and vice versa? Alright, so the first thing is there's like a really common trope to associate FE with selflessness and FI with like self-centeredness, and that's just total bunk. Like it doesn't have any validity. But it is true that the way that FE is selfish or giving and the way FI is selfless or giving can be different. So we'll talk about that a little bit. And then as far as like mental health and personal fulfillment, finding the line between what's doing best for yourself and serving others, it's kind of a philosophical point, and I'll talk a little bit about my opinion on that, and then also how it kind of intersects with typology. So I think the first thing I want to talk about, let's see, there's so much to dive into. The first thing, let's talk about how FE types can be selfish or selfless, and FI types as well. So I touched on this a little bit in my SJW video, but FE types tend to start from a position of wanting to be included in the group, wanting to mold themselves to fit the group, and then over time, especially around teenage years and early 20s, develop their own sense of individuality. For FI types, it's the opposite. They tend to start out as children wanting to express their individuality, and then around their teenage years, going into their early 20s, start wanting to find a way to fit into a group. And the reason for that is because that's the time that we start to integrate our ignoring function. I discussed that in my video about function development, when you should develop different functions. Your ignoring function is the opposite attitude of your dominant function. So if you're an EFJ, your dominant function is FE, your ignoring function is FI. As far as lower FE and FI users, so IFJs and EFPs, it's going to be pretty balanced for them throughout their lives. So for an IFJ, actually their FI is stronger than their FE, and for an EFP, their FE is stronger than their FI. That said, they do value the other one better. So IFJs do value FE more, and EFPs do value FI more, and that could have some kinds of interplay. But generally, they'll be pretty well balanced between the two directions, and that in that sense, that's not something that they have to really worry about. IFJs, the struggles they have with other people are not due to an imbalance of FE and FI. They tend to have a pretty good grasp on both of them. So there's like a concept that I've been chewing on for a while, which is often you see this kind of polarity between two extremes of some kind of idea. And I really think that it's a misconception to say that the middle is the right answer. Okay, so here I'm talking specifically about selfishness versus selflessness. You see, an extreme of people who are selfish, who only care about what they want. With FE, that might be lying to people, manipulating people, spreading rumors to get people to like you instead of someone else. With FI, it might be ignoring other people's requests, ignoring the needs of your family or your friends, only caring about what you want. An example might be, someone who like goes to a funeral and just like screams about how evil the person who died was because they don't care, because that's how they really feel. Like that would be an example of being selfish in an FI way. So that's one extreme. And then the other extreme is like this extreme like self-sacrifice. Like for FE, it might be like never caring about their own needs and only just doing whatever everyone wants, like being a pushover. Like that's really not much of an EFJ thing, and EFJs who think that they're pushovers are probably not super self-aware, which is fairly common. But like But yeah, like making sacrifices that you don't want to make, that is a thing that happens. So you know, someone doesn't like something, so you just stop doing it even though you really want to. That would be a way that FE could be too selfless. And then FI can be too selfless in the sense of also being self-sacrificing, I would say, especially SFPs. SFPs can be too willing to compromise their beliefs in order to make other people happy and not realize it until later. NFPs, I don't really sense that very much. The biggest issue an NFP might face is not being willing to say what they think publicly, like not being willing to publicly defend themselves or stand up to someone. I'm not sure that I would necessarily call that selflessness, though. You know, it's from my perspective, that mostly just looks like cowardice or something. Like, you know, someone does something you think is wrong and you just like don't say anything. That's the issue, right? So selflessness on the surface looks like you're doing something for someone else, but the truth is that you're really still doing it for yourself. For the FE person that can't say no, they're not refusing to say no because like they really love this other person and they want to make them happy, so much as they're refusing to say no because they're afraid of what other people will think about them if they do. They're afraid that if they say no, their friends won't like them anymore. They're afraid that if they don't do everything for everyone else, then when they need something, no one will be there for them, right? So actually these acts of selflessness are kind of selfishness in a way. And same thing with FI, like someone I care about does something that I think is really wrong, but I don't say anything. You know, in your head you can spin that a story like, oh, I don't say anything because I don't want to hurt them, or I don't, you know, it's not my place to say anything, right? But like if you see it from another angle, it's a kind of selfishness in that like I don't say anything because I don't want them to yell at me, because I don't want to get in trouble, because I don't want to have to defend my beliefs. That's a big reason people can be self-sacrificing and meek, is that they're afraid to be put in a situation where they have to defend what they think, right? Because they're afraid maybe I won't be able to prove that I'm worth more than this, or maybe I won't be able to prove that my feelings about the issue are valid, you know, so it's better to just not say anything or whatever. But then the story you tell yourself in your mind as you're doing it is, oh, I'm doing it for the other person. So that's what I mean when I say you have these two extremes. And a lot of times people will say, try to find the middle. That's where you should be. So you shouldn't be too selfish, or you shouldn't be too selfless. You should kind of just be in the middle. And I actually think that's a really big issue, to believe that the right answer is always in the middle. If you have two choices between like killing someone and leaving them alone, then the middle is like gravely injuring them, right? So the middle is not necessarily, the middle of two bad points is not necessarily a good point, right? So when we're talking about this selfishness, selflessness debate, what we're really talking about is being able to make accurate judgments and having like a value system, you know, knowing what you stand for and what is important to you. And I think that's not always that easy, right? But having courage is a really big thing. It's really not, and I think it's really important to get out of the mindset of it's about my standing up for myself versus helping other people, right? Or it's about doing what I want versus doing what other people want. I really think that's a false dichotomy. I think it's important to see yourself as one data point in a collection of data. So you are one individual in the group of the people who this decision affects, right? If I'm deciding, you know, should I take this job even though it makes less money because it's my dream job, but maybe, you know, my wife and kids won't be able to buy as many like nice things or whatever, like making this decision. You know, the stereotypical selfless answer is to sacrifice and take a job you hate so that your wife and kids are happy. The selfish answer is to take the job and not care about your wife and kids. And you're like, which one do I do? Like there's no middle ground there, right? You either take it or you don't. Are you selfless or are you selfish? But really, it's just a totally backwards way of approaching the issue. What you really need to do is think about, you know, what is the long-term goal here, not only for me, but for all the people involved. And like, especially when you're making decisions that affect other people, you really don't have the right to assume what their ideal end game is. And especially I'm addressing this issue because it happens a lot with IJs, where you're trying to make a decision, and a lot of times the sticking point is that you're projecting your own beliefs and feelings about an issue onto the people around you. And so I think when you're trying to decide what the right thing to do is, the number one first thing you need to do is make sure you're working with accurate information about people's motivations, about their desires, their intentions, and so forth. So in this job example, the first thing that you should do is go to your wife and kids. Just tell them the situation. There's this job I want. It's a job I'd really like, but it'd be less money. It could mean these consequences. How do you feel about it? And just listen with an open mind. They might say something that you totally don't expect, which makes the issue really easy for you. So yeah, listen. And then once you have, complete information, do research on it. How have other people handled these kind of situations is a really useful thing to do. Visualize yourself in different situations. Try to think about like what's realistic, pros and cons can be useful. And finally, when it comes down to time to make the decision, your final point is like, what's best for me or what's best for other people. I think that you'll find that those desires are often interconnected. If I really love my wife, and taking this job would make her miserable, then it's not really gonna make me happy to take it. You know what I mean? Or let's say I love my wife and this job would be like the best thing that's ever happened to me, right? And it'll have like just a small negative effect on her. Well, like if we're really right for each other, then the choice that I make, my happiness will outweigh that small negative effect. Like it won't even, like ideally it wouldn't even have a negative effect on her because she'd be so happy for me, and like the environment in the house would be so much better, and so forth. She'd be happy to see someone she's loved happy. And then like if you notice that there's some tension there, right, where this group of people's preferences are antithetical to my preferences. If I do the thing that truly is best for me, not only just my fantasies, but also like should be best for the people around me and stuff, and then that causes discord, then what that often indicates is that there's an issue in the circumstances you're putting yourself in, right? That the relationship is not the right relationship for you, or that the problem you're thinking about is actually not the biggest problem that you're facing. And so I think it's really important to notice where those tension points are, because if you have all the information, you've asked explicitly and received information from other people about what they want, and you realize that like it's not compatible, your desires are not compatible with the people around you's desires, then you need to have a second look about like, well, what situation are we really finding ourselves in? Why are we tied up with people who have inherently different needs and goals from us? And you also need to be able to, since you're looking at yourself as one data point in the collection of people that are being considered, you need to question whether or not you're giving that data the proper amount of attention. Okay? And especially keep in mind that like, as far as your happiness and your protection, you are the number one arbiter of that, right? So each individual person has a responsibility to safeguard their happiness and their safety and their future, because that's their responsibility. It's not like a thing you're doing because you're selfish, right? It's your responsibility to take care of yourself and to understand the impact of having, if you're stressed, if you're anxious, if you're depressed, like that has an impact on the other people around you. It has an impact on your work. It has an impact on how well you can serve other people or make decisions. So if you're not taking care of your own needs and you're not taking care of your own happiness, that's not being selfless. That's actually being selfish, because what you're doing is you're saying like, I'm afraid to have to say no to someone. I'm afraid to let people see the real me. I want them to think about me a different way. So I'm willing to sacrifice, the amount of effort I can give. I'm willing to sacrifice my relationships, like my intimacy with other people, because I'm afraid to say no, or because I'm afraid to, you know, address something that's really bothering me. And so when you're considering yourself as a data point, you really need to step back from I guess what I'm saying is you need to think about yourself with as much gravitas as you think about other people. And on top of that, you need to recognize that you have a unique responsibility to protect yourself and take care of yourself in a way that other people don't. I would say the only person you're more responsible for protecting and taking care of are your kids, if you have them. But even then, like, it's like put your own mask on before you take care of them, right? So you need to make sure that you're in a position. I'm sorry, my battery died. I took a shower. Can you tell I'm really tired today? Okay. So what I'm saying is you need to make sure that you're strong enough that you're in the position to actually make your best judgments. And part of doing that is ensuring that your needs, both physical and psychological, are taken care of. And any choices you make under extreme duress or without taking into consideration your own needs are not possible to be selfless choices or actions, because you'll be inherently underperforming if you're not taking care of your own needs. So I think that's an important mentality to go into that situation with. Yeah, if there are like specific examples, I'm happy to address them. But I think most of the time when someone says, you know, I don't like this thing, how do I tell this person, or how do I deal with it, or which should I do, what I want or what they want, I think people usually already know the answer of what they should do. The only thing that would be holding that back is, like I said, if they don't have the accurate information, if they didn't actually ask the people involved what they think. But like, seriously, just being upfront with people and genuine and not blaming is really big. If you refuse to blame people, go into situations with the mentality that people are usually doing the best they know how to do. You know, so even if you're in an intolerable situation or someone's doing something that you need them to stop doing or anything like that, just going into it with the perspective of, you know, me setting my boundaries, saying what I want and what I care about is not the same thing as attacking someone else or blaming them for my problems. It's just defending myself. And I think you need to reflect that in the language you use when you talk to people too, you know, not, you're always so blah, 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 how dare you, like, right? That's an act of cruelty most of the time, you know, however minor or serious. But just, you did this thing, I can't live with this thing, so let's find a solution or let's move on, that kind of thing, you know. So I especially think this advice is going to be useful for FE valuing people, because it's kind of a TI approach to problem solving. Kind of in a certain way it's reductionist. It's reducing people to, like I said, to data points, and then manipulating and playing with the points to figure out like what the best solution is. But I think for FI people too, that point of view can be useful. Part of the question was like, what can FE types learn from FI types and vice versa? So I said before, especially IFJs often assume other people's like opinions on something. I'm gonna rescind that and change it to just FJs in general often assume that we know what other people want. And so I think in that way we can learn from FI to realize that just because something seems objectively good to us doesn't mean that it's what everyone else feels or thinks. So for example, you know, just because I care about having the money to buy nice things doesn't mean that my wife really cares about that. Or, you know, like my husband and I have a lot of examples of this. There are things that he needs from me that I don't care about at all, you know, and lots of vice versa. I have lots of needs, you know, that he takes care of me that are not sacrifices for him or not like big sacrifices for him, but would be for me, you know. He often cooks for me, prepares meals for me, and I'm so grateful for him doing that. And I feel guilty because if I had to prepare meals for someone else, like, it's hard enough for me to prepare meals for myself, let alone for someone else. So I would be like so overworked and stressed and all this stuff. And like, I have to realize that my guilt in that sense, like my initial reaction if I didn't know about this kind of issue would be, oh, I feel guilty, I'm making him cook for me, what a horrible thing to put him through. I'm a horrible person, but also I can't, like, I know I won't be able to eat this healthily if he doesn't prepare for me. So like, should I be selfish and let him keep doing it, or should I be selfless and tell him to stop? Well, it's a false dichotomy, because for him, that's not a big issue. He doesn't mind. He enjoys it. He enjoys the opportunity to take care of me, and in that way, and like, vice versa, the ways that I take care of him are not difficult for me. They don't require any meaningful amount of sacrifice from me, and I get pleasure out of them, whereas for him, if he had to do that for other people, it would be stressful. So I think, just keeping in mind that like your needs are not the same as other people's needs, and you can't make assumptions about what's going on in other people's heads. That's the biggest way that FE can learn from FI. As far as how FI can learn from FE, I think it would be to understand that there are extenuating circumstances in everybody's lives. The issue is more along the lines of when people have a different view, they struggle to understand how that view could possibly be valid. If I hate this thing, you love it, what's wrong with you? FI is like the ultimate hipster. I'm joking a little bit, but it's also got an element of truth in it. So I think what FI can learn from FE is to push yourself to try to understand why the person believes the things they do. And if you think it doesn't make sense, or it's not understandable, like it's just obviously wrong, it's obviously stupid and evil, or obviously bad in some way, then you don't really understand. Because if you're able to look at a situation from someone else's perspective, you will understand why they chose that. Even if you end up not agreeing with their choice, you'll still understand why. And like, it's not understanding to say like, oh, they're just stupid, or oh, they're just brainwashed, or they're just shallow. Okay, an insult is not the same thing as really understanding it like you were in their shoes. So I think that for FI people, it's an important challenge to push yourself to empathize with them, in the sense of, what situation would I have to be in to feel or act the way they do? If someone's treating you in a way that you don't like, you need to take some time and think about, what would it take for me to treat someone like this? And if you can use any real information about, facts in their life, try to use that to inform your analysis of the situation, and if you can't put yourself in a situation where you would do it, that means you don't really understand why they're doing it. And if you don't really understand why they're doing it, then you're not going to be able to deal with it properly. So, but I really think that FI dealing with selfishness, yeah, that would lead to selfishness, not understanding that other people have valid reasons for their points of view. So that can push you towards making better choices. As far as people that are too meek or too afraid to stand up for themselves, I think FE can help in that way too, in the sense of finding that kind of connection between yourself and the rest of humanity. Understanding that you are not an individual item, and then the rest of humanity is an individual item, right? Understanding that it's interconnected, that you have a place in the history of society, that your struggles have been had 100 times before. There's nothing new under the sun. That there are a million other people in the world right now that are feeling the same emotion you're feeling, that are scared of the same things you're scared of, are excited by the same things you're excited by, and so forth. Like, understanding that part of you that connects you to the greater sense of humanity that all of us share, can be really useful in kind of releasing some of that tension that like imbues your choices with so much meaning that you feel paralyzed. You know, like, do I talk to the guy I like or not? Do I talk to him? I like him so much. What if he says no, I'm gonna die, right? But like, people have been liking people for, yeah, I don't know how old humanity is, but at least thousands of years, right? Like, so you are definitely not the first person to ever be in this situation, and this one time person A likes person B and they don't know if their feelings are reciprocated, even though it feels like the most important thing you've ever experienced. Like, it's just one of a million examples, and it's got its own special flavor and it's got its own personal meaning to you, and I don't mean to diminish that, but if the question is how can FE teach FI people something, or give them some kind of development in some way, it would be that being able to see things in the perspective, in a more global perspective, and you know, releasing some of the tension by recognizing that things that seem extremely personally meaningful and significant are not objectively, and that because they're not objectively the most significant thing that's ever happened, you do have the capability to change how you react to them. You know, just because something seems really scary or really important right now doesn't mean that you'll always feel that way, or that you have to always feel that way. And if you can look at it from other people's perspectives, in the sense of like thinking about characters in books or people in history or whatever who've gone through similar situations and trying to identify with them and find that kind of connection there, I think that'll help kind of unparalyze you and make it a little more easier to come down to earth and make decisions based on what's happening in reality, and not just the feelings and thoughts in your head. So that would be my advice for how FI can benefit from FE, you know, especially in this topic, because I think there's lots of ways we can all benefit from each other. So I hope this answered the question. You know, it's a big topic. I procrastinated a bit because I wasn't sure if I could do it justice, but I shared at least what I know and what I've learned over the past years, and I hope it will be useful for someone. And if anybody has any more questions, please just let me know. I'm happy to ramble like this if you guys want to listen. And I'll see you in my next video. Bye.